Is she making the decision? I don't know. Oksana?
No, we are making the decision. Well, Oksana will join us later.
She'll be here in a few minutes.
I lost her.
Oh dear. Hello?
I hope you can.
Hello. Okay, welcome everybody. We're here to present our book that we've done, which is called Cooking in Sorrow, which is actually, the title is a literal translation word for word of a book that Yevhenia did a few years ago called Gotujemy w żurbie, but the book itself is in the same spirit, but not a translation. We rewrote it in English for foreign audiences. The main idea, I think, of why we thought it would be a good idea to do an English version is that Ukraine, over the last 4 years, has gone from being a country that not many people knew that much about or had that much of an idea of, to being a country that everyone associates with incredibly brave people and people who are suffering a terrible injustice and bombed cities and unpleasant things, war. And we thought that it would be good to have something about Ukraine that is about other aspects of Ukraine that's a bit lighthearted, which is not entirely lighthearted, in fact, but that is nevertheless something more modern and humorous. And this is the original żurbie was based around Zhenia's kind of started out as joke recipes and then texts about food. And Yevhenia, you're going to start by reading the text, which obviously had to come first because it's the food item that Ukraine has successfully fought to have included on the UNESCO World Heritage List, borshch.
Yeah, oh, it doesn't work already. Just a second. They start now. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I like starting events and I like starting book presentation with reading text just because it's tasting immediately what we are talking about. So let's start with borshch. Yeah. Borshch is the philosopher's stone of Ukrainian cuisine. There is no standard recipe for borshch, but every Ukrainian family is convinced that it is the unique bearer of the sacred knowledge of what true borshch is made of. It follows that you should never ask about the recipe for borshch in the company more than one person. If you do, you risk provoking a borshch srach, the epic battle of Ukrainian cuisine. Borshch srach, from borshch and srach, meaning a quarrel, is inevitable whenever people from different families try to give instructions on how to cook borshch, or spell it in English. They will fight over whether to add beans, over what kind of meat to use, if any, and what kind of beet. Yes, there are different kinds of beet, tomatoes, and cabbage. These before they even get to the sequence of adding the ingredients. They will fight over the smell, texture, and color, insulting, mocking, and humiliating each other. Many a Ukrainian relationship has broken down over whether or not to add a spoon of honey to the borshch. And for good reason, for disagreement over borshch is the epitome of disharmony. Borshch is all about the delicate balance of sour, sweet, and salty, and can only be achieved by combining hundreds of ingredients in exactly perfect proportions. I would not allow those adding beans to borshch to vote, Vasil, a radio journalist and now a soldier in the Ukrainian army, said in an exclusive comment. Borshch without beans is like democratic Russia, never existed, said Raya, a retired teacher. There is only one way to stop borshch srach, and here foreigners can play an important peacekeeping role. You can drop a hint that you believe borshch may in some way be connected to Russia. Maybe ask what's the difference between Ukrainian and Russian borshch is, and then everyone will forget their differences and unite to collectively insult, mock, and humiliate you. Borshch was expropriated by Tsarist and then Soviet cuisine as a bright, cheap, and easy-to-cook, vitamin-rich dish. But digested by the Russian Empire, borshch has obviously lost its true essence and taste. Ukrainians get so angry about people suggesting that borshch is a Russian dish that they made UNESCO issue a certificate stating that it belongs to Ukraine. Sadly, the International Criminal Court rejected the idea of introducing the death penalty for attributing borshch to Russia. So, is it all possible to cook the true borshch? Borshch is not about the result. It's about Dao, the way. Ukrainians spend their lives trying to replicate their grandmother's borshch. Deep inside, you know you will never manage to reach that exquisite taste, but this is no reason to stop trying. Ukrainians are a stubborn people. The trick is that eventually you become a grandparent whose borshch someone will try to reproduce. Thank you. Oh! So Gulliver made this short introduction why we decided to write this book. And actually, yeah, this is a kind of adaptation of my Ukrainian book that is called Готуємо в журбі. But then, when I realized that I wanted to do a translation, I understood that I will never ever be able to do it by myself, just because I need to adapt humor. I need not just a translator, I need an editor and a co-author. And I was lucky to have Gulliver in our family, so that's how Gulliver became my co-author. So Gulliver, and some chapters I would never be able to write some chapters just because I don't have this outsider's view on Ukraine and on Ukrainian cuisine and on Ukrainian manners. I would like Gulliver to read the chapter that he wrote about Ukraine and about Ukrainian manners that are somehow different from other European and maybe Western manners. It's 44, I think, is it? Yeah. So it's all about manners.
Hello. Yeah. The spectacle of a Ukrainian family having a meal together may appear rather brutal to the untrained observer. Pour me some soup. More than that, come on. What about the sour cream? Not one spoonful, two for heaven's sakes, and so on. But to Ukrainians, it's foreigners, and particularly, I think, the British, like me, who appear quite absurdly obsequious. One of the many things Volodymyr Zelensky has had to learn on his amazing journey from being a mediocre comedian to undisputed leader of the free world is to say thank you. The first to upbraid the embattled war leader on his manners was the UK Defence Minister Ben Wallace, who suggested in summer 2023 that a little more gratitude might be in order for the UK's contribution to helping Ukraine help the UK not get attacked by Russia in turn. Of course, this rubbed Zelensky up the wrong way at first, but then he heeded the advice and thereafter made a point of thanking Ukraine's allies profusely at every opportunity, to the point that to Ukrainians it seems like he's playing it up for a laugh, but not apparently to foreigners. On the 28th of February 2025, during their notorious White House clash, the US Vice President J.D. Vance angrily shouted that Zelensky had not said thank you for American assistance. He had countless times. Since then, the Ukrainian leader has turned the gratitude knob way up beyond 11. Geopolitical bullying aside, there is a cultural difference at play here. To Ukrainians, gratitude has to mean something. It's for when someone has done something for you that goes beyond the normal order of things and does not benefit them just as much as you. To Americans, Ukraine should say thank you for their help, even if it is also in the US's interests to help Ukraine. To Ukrainians, that is less obvious, because gratitude is not required in Ukraine for the kind of behavior that is standard among friends. If a stranger offers you a cup of tea, you can say thank you. When ordering in a restaurant, you might say please and thanks, though if you're a regular there, you probably don't need to. But if a good friend or a member of your Ukrainian family offers you a cup of tea, watch out. It could actually be considered downright rude to say, yes, please, because by doing that, you're suggesting that you're not actually that close. So if you offer a Ukrainian a hot drink and they flatly reply yes, or even just grunt or nod, and then you put it in front of them and they still say nothing, let alone thank you, or even just bluntly demand sugar or milk, they're not being rude. It means they love you.
Thank you. So now you have, you imagine a bit about what our book is about, but I would like to ask some questions to Gulliver, because he has this outsider's view on Ukraine. Gully, could you please tell us what were your cultural shocks when you came to Ukraine? And maybe you can expand on some best food experiences in Ukraine for you.
Well, despite having written that book chapter about it, I still can't get over the manners thing. I'm still offended really, really often when people don't say thank you, and even though I've been here for 12 years. Other cultural shocks, we discussed this before, but I'm not sure I can remember what cultural, let's move on to the food experiences.
Yeah, food experiences, yeah.
The best food experience that I had was just when I moved to Ukraine. I'd been coming to Ukraine for a few years and I knew Ukraine a bit, but it was when I came to Maidan that I started to be here permanently. So in, I guess, December 2013, which is 12 years ago, isn't it exactly, when it first froze. And I don't know if any of you were there, but do you remember that there were various sandwiches that were being distributed? And sometimes it was really so cold that the bread froze. And there were also people distributing soup, which was hot because it was in thermoses. And if you dipped a frozen sandwich in the soup, this was the most wonderful thing, that it would just, the bread would go melt and become edible. And that was a fantastic culinary experience. And that was also the period when I began to really, appreciate Ukraine.
That's perfect. And did you have any assumptions or myths?
The soup, by the way, I think was probably borshch. Yeah.
Oh God!
Maybe I shouldn't call it soup.
After 13 years in Ukraine, you don't know that borshch is not soup.
Well, I think there were maybe different soups. Maybe Christina, you could remember.
Oh, please don't repeat that in a less friendly environment, please.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes.
So, did you have before coming to Ukraine for permanent residence? Did you have any assumptions, or did you have any myths or truths about Ukraine, and which of them appeared to be true, if you had any?
Not a lot, although. Unlike, I guess, a lot of people in Western Europe who, if they'd never been to any of the former Soviet countries and never been to Russia, I had a little bit more of an idea about things because I had been to Russia. I spent 3 months in Moscow when I was 18 teaching English, and I went a couple of times on school trips. And so coming to Ukraine, I already was clear that Ukraine is not Russia, and also I'm generally quite interested in geography and stuff, so I wasn't sort of confused on that score. But it took me years of being here really to understand about the real situation of the Ukrainian language. I mean, I very quickly became aware, even the first time that I came here, I knew that most people in Kiev, this was in 2007, years before I ever thought that I would ever come to live here. And I understood that in Kiev, I'd find that most people spoke Russian, and I was keen in those days, folly of youth, to learn the Russian language. And then it took a very long time to understand the Ukrainian language, which was the official language, was actually still, at that time and until very, very recently, the language that was more kind of repressed, and not the minority, rather than the Russian being a
So you were one of those annoying foreigners who would say, but everyone speaks Russian here.
Yes, and then you had, and I'm ashamed to say that it was only, after some years of being here that I really learned why the people didn't just speak Russian because they always had for many, many generations. I remember reading you took issue with some article in the Western media that said that when in 2022 people were starting to speak to their children a language that was not the language that their parents spoke to them, when Russian-speaking Ukrainians started to speak Ukrainian, and the article said that their parents and grandparents spoke to them. Their parents and grandparents spoke. And to me, I wouldn't have raised an eyebrow at this. And it was you and Marichka who said, not their grandparents. Only their parents would have been the ones who spoke Russian, because the switch to Russian happened, only that recently during the Soviet time. Lots of people still don't understand that in the West. Lots of people don't sort of think about why are there a lot of Russian-speaking Ukrainians. They didn't just come from Russia, or they didn't just, they spoke Russian because it was imposed on them by the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union.
Do you think one of the reasons, obviously you worked here a lot, but do you think one of the reasons you thought that everyone speaks Russian in Ukraine is that because you've never been, you did not visit rural Ukraine much, right? And now I'm pushing forward to our other chapters about watermelons and tomatoes, and tell us about the experience of visiting rural Ukraine.
I think that you're hinting that I should read the chapter about Kherson region, right? Because one of the experiences, I had visited some places in rural Ukraine, but mostly in the West, up until the full-scale invasion. Actually, no, I already had reported in Kharkiv region and noticed that in Kharkiv region, you'll have Ukrainian-speaking villages and also Russian-speaking villages, and sometimes it's a Russian-speaking. There's one just to the east of Kharkiv where almost everyone speaks Russian because a lot of people were brought in from elsewhere to work in some particular company that they had there. And then just a few kilometers away, there'll be this patchwork, there'll be a Ukrainian-speaking village, so it'll be this kind of a patchwork. So I was kind of aware of that to some extent, and I'd read about it, but only after the full-scale invasion did I start to spend a lot of time in rural parts of Kherson region and finding there that everyone, and it was really rare to find people in rural places who would spontaneously start speaking Russian, and which leads us to, there's a couple of chapters really about Kherson region, one of them being about one of the unsung facts about Ukraine, which I think that it's slightly odd that people don't make the connection necessarily with the fact that Ukraine has got the most fertile soil in the world, and a lot of people have got that message, but that also leads to extremely high quality produce beyond just the grain and wheat that it's famous for exporting, and why Ukraine has got the best tomatoes. And the first chapter about Kherson is about its incredibly delicious tomatoes. The second chapter about Kherson region is about the watermelons. Do you want me to read it, or are you going to read it? You found the page already. Thank you. I need the microphone for this as well. You might think that the region that produces the world's best tomatoes would be famous above all for its tomatoes. But no, they are only Kherson region's second most renowned red and round product. Top of the list is the watermelon, which even has its own monument, greeting visitors who enter Kherson Oblast from the north. Eating watermelon in Ukraine is a sacred ritual. First, the sacrificial sphere must be chosen. Ukraine is part of what geographers dub the watermelon slapping belt, which stretches all the way from the steppe to the shores of the Atlantic in Portugal. Like most southern Europeans, Ukrainians slap watermelons in the shop. It's not a weird fetish. Most Ukrainians are confident that they can determine a watermelon's quality without cutting it open. They slap it, knock on it, and listen for the perfect echo. Wrong note? Leave that one behind for the amateurs. There is a scientific basis for this acoustic testing. Sound waves travel more easily through water, so the more watery it gets, the deeper the sound. Unripe, and it will be sharp and metallic. You want a happy medium, basically, though whether the human ear can really capture the nuances, I should maybe add here that I certainly can't, is another matter. But if a watermelon sounded right but turned out bland, the purchaser will take it as a personal betrayal. Now, back to the ritual sacrifice. Watermelons should be eaten outdoors. A large bowl is brought out along with the biggest knife in the house, ideally a machete. The first step is to slice off the top. Everyone watches. If it cracks on its own, it's a good omen. The watermelon was ready to meet its fate. Then it's cut into skibki, slices, and from this point it's all a blur. Juice dripping, loud slurping, deep bites into the flesh, a moment of pure, primal connection with the fruit of the soil. The center of the watermelon is the sweetest part, and it's seedless. In Ukraine, we call it the soul. Poetic, isn't it? The soul is normally given to children and the elderly. So when we hear that watermelon is for dessert, we prepare the ritual. When we hear that watermelon is for dessert, we prepare the ritual. But when someone serves us neatly cut watermelon cubes to be eaten with toothpicks, something inside us dies.
Really, it's one of my favorite definitions in this book is this watermelon slapping belt. I think it's something really new. And a colleague of mine, a former colleague of mine, Michael Gentile, he is a professor of human geography. So actually,
yes, we have this from an academic source.
Yeah, we have the academic stamp on this definition. We had lunch with Michael, and we've been discussing this chapter because we were not sure if it would be true if we would say that only Ukrainians slap watermelons. And Mike, his father is Italian, so he said, no way, no way. In Italy, we also slap watermelons. And then we started researching the topic. And finally, we decided that there is this southern watermelon slapping belt, like the geographical part of the world where people are sure that they should slap watermelon before they eat it. You were going to add something, eh?
No.
No. Mm-hmm. Okay. But coming back before to the truths and myths about Ukraine, I would also like you to tell us a little bit more. That before that you lived in Poland, right? Okay, a very provocative question, and I know the answer to it. But anyway, I will ask you: what do you like more, pierogi or varenyky?
Pierogi. Why did you make me say this?
I just wanted you to feel ashamed.
But there are those who argue that there's no difference.
Okay, tell us the difference. Okay, tell us the difference. Obviously, I like varenyky more because
why? Obviously,
the dough in varenyky, the dough is a little bit thinner on its edges, and those thick.
So there is a
dough,
difference,
who
right?
needs it?
I don't know, because it's nicer, especially if you fry it, I think.
Fry varenyky. Oh my God. No, we don't fry varenyky. Okay, last exam for you.
But let's just be clear that you're not just purely nationalistic about your culinary choices, right? Because you also like pelmeni, which you we should admit in the book are not Ukrainian. So, you know.
Okay, I should read varenyky now.
Okay.
So I should read them now because I did not expect you to make me feel ashamed.
Well, I just didn't, you know, it's because I was feeling ashamed myself of having to have been so honest.
Okay, so varenyky. Everyone knows what varenyky are, right? Varenyky. You may know varenyky by their foreign name, pierogi. In some parts of Western Ukraine, they are called pierogi, but the more usual Ukrainian name for these soft, tender dumplings stuffed with potatoes, cabbage, cheese, sour cherries, strawberries, or anything else your imagination is capable of is varenyky. The most common kind, though, are the ones stuffed with a mixture of potato, onion, and cottage cheese. One of the many traumas Ukrainians may face after crossing the western border is discovering that in Poland, these are known as pierogi ruskie. For the Poles to claim pierogi as their own would be one thing, wrong of course, but debatable. But for them to credit the Russians with the inventions, Ukrainian hearts skip a beat when they see that on the menu. Unless, that is, they know their etymology, because Ruski in this case does not refer to Russia, but to Kievan Rus, the original medieval state on these lands, with its center in Kiev. The old name for Ukraine, you might say, but actually better not, because Muscovy hijacked it, albeit only much later. The Polish word for Russian is not Ruski, but Rossiyski. All the same, amid the rush of solidarity in 2022, some Polish restaurants started calling them pierogi ukraińskie. Polish Railways catering service went for pierogi galicyjskie, after the region where the dumplings were first made, which may or may not have been part of Poland at that time. See how politically correct we are, may or may not. Today, varenyky are made all over Ukraine, not in Russia. Russians don't make varenyky and don't have a name for them. Their favorite dumplings, pelmeni, that's what I'm ashamed of, reflect their Asian heritage, being that much more similar to Chinese dim sum, which historians believe may be at the origin of this whole idea, varenyky included, and of Italian ravioli too, having been brought back from China by Marco Polo, but that's another story. The somewhat inconvenient truth is that in Ukraine, pelmeni are pretty popular too. But we are honestly not experts in this field. Do not look for them here. Perhaps after the eventual disintegration of Russia, you may visit its former eastern provinces to enjoy them as they were meant to be. Now let's define the varenyky lexicon. Varenyczka, a round piece of the dough, a base for the future varenyk. Varenyk, a dumpling. Varenyky, dumplings, plural. Now to the verb. The correct verb to use for the process of preparing varenyky is not to cook or to make, but to sculpt. Sculpting varenyky develops fine motor skills, engaging small muscle groups in the hands and fingers, which in turn sharpens the mind. Perhaps this is why Ukrainians tend to have vivid imaginations and dexterous hands. Sculpting varenyky is a social act. First, you prepare the dough. To ensure it's elastic and perfect for sculpting, it must be kneaded thoroughly. My grandmother's advice was knead until your back is soaked with sweat, and then knead a little more. While sculpting varenyky, conversations flow. Family matters, politics, even arguments may arise. Unlike bread dough, which is sensitive, varenyky dough is resilient and carefree. Bread dough cannot tolerate conflict. It may become discouraged and fail to rise. Varenyky dough requires no therapy. So feel free to joke, debate, or quarrel while sculpting varenyky. It makes the process easier and more enjoyable. He baths like a varenyk in butter, is what Ukrainians say of someone who is living a luxurious life. Now that must feel good. Be prepared. Ukrainians never make varenyky in small quantities. Making fewer than 100 would be unthinkable, as long as you've got the freezer space. They must be sculpted, spread out separately on a sheet, frozen, then once frozen so they won't stick to each other, put in bags for more compact storage. A freezer stocked with varenyky provides Ukrainians with a deep sense of security, much like a good insurance policy does for Germans.
I've got an anecdote about varenyky, which I think points to the kind of attitude that people had to Ukrainian food and to Eastern European food in general, which is the fault of communism. That in all of the communist countries, for all of those years, the kind of food that was served in canteens, restaurants, cafes was generally pretty bad. Only if you went and had home-cooked food with some people would you eat some proper, nice, traditional. And so all of Eastern Europe developed a reputation for bad and weird food, which was immortalized in the French film Le Père Noël est un ordure, the Father Christmas is a poo, which I haven't seen, and I haven't even seen the scene that it's from, but it became such a famous meme in France that there's a guy who's from some Eastern European country in the film who serves his French hosts or guests some dish which they can't understand what it is, and it looks really weird, and he says it's called klug. And the French people started to use klug as just a word for any piece of food that they don't know what it is and it looks weird. And I came to Ukraine in 2010 to report on that fateful election where you made the mistake of electing Viktor Yanukovych. And we were in Kharkiv with my colleague who'd never been to anywhere in Eastern Europe before. And I ordered varenyky with cherries for dessert. And it came and it was like grey. And she said, this looks like klug. And that was when I found out about this film. She told me the whole anecdote, and I still haven't watched the actual movie. But then she tried it, and it's like, whoa, but it's actually really nice. And I think that that's the general foreigner's experience of Ukrainian food is, apart from, some star items like borshch, people are thinking it's probably mostly klug. And then, in fact, they find, actually, it's really nice. And
But the culinary culture has changed in recent years a lot, hasn't it?
The culinary culture has changed, of course, but because this is as a result of economic change. That
you mentioned that you've been to Moscow. Sorry,
I mean to say now, of course, Ukraine is full of wonderful cafes and restaurants, and there's lots of great food everywhere, which people are discovering. And Ukraine has become famous for its coffee to some degree as well.
Yeah, so probably that's what communism and lack of market made to our to street food, to cafes, to restaurants. Yeah, and because I can't remember that actually, because in 90s we could not afford going outside to eat somewhere. So when you were in Moscow, what was your experience there? Because it was quite early.
Oh, yeah. I went to Moscow with the prejudice that the food was going to be terrible. Oh, the first time I went on a school trip. And so our whole aim was to avoid eating whatever food they would give us. We were terrified of it. But that's when I was like 15. But then when I spent 3 months in Moscow teaching, I was still only 18. And I really just mostly ate bananas and Snickers because I was... the landlady that I lived with, she worked in the canteen of the school where I was teaching, and I really...
Which year was it?
97. And she would try to make me come to the canteen and gave me kasha, which I actually really like these days, kasha with meat. But in that canteen of that university in 1997, it was not very nice at all.
So our suggestion is that what communists made to different cultures, not just Moscow, I suppose, but also to Ukraine and also
I think also Poland and even Yugoslavia. I don't know, maybe not so much Yugoslavia because they've got that southern vibe going on, but.
And now we approached the sad part of the book because the book is not all funny. There are some quite sad messages, and maybe you could read the Soviet.
You want me to read this bit?
Yeah.
Okay. But you wrote it.
Come on, read it.
Okay. The Soviet dictator. I mean, all of the chapters were written by both of us, but some of them were written more by Yevhenia than by me, and some were written more by me than by Yevhenia. The Soviet dictatorship scarred Ukrainians in countless ways. It's all going to be us, though. I'm going to change it to them. The Soviet dictatorship scarred Ukrainians in countless ways. It persuaded them that they spoke the wrong language, lived the wrong life, cherished the wrong values, that they were too attached to their land, with freight trains to Siberia as a cure for that, and ultimately claimed that they didn't exist at all. Recovery from violence takes time, and Ukrainians' journey toward healing is ongoing. Lately, we've been doing our best to shove the enemy out the door. But back then, they had to share a table with Russia. That left deep wounds in Ukrainians' relationship with food. First came the genocide by artificial famine in 1933, when up to 4 million Ukrainians died a gruesome death. That trauma stamped itself into daily habits. Our grandmothers forbade living food unfinished, asked us to kiss bread if it fell on the ground, and always kept what seemed to us like unnecessary stockpiles at home. Ukrainians still follow these practices, half unaware. Beyond that, Soviet food aesthetics were traumatic by design. Communism fought hedonism, so dressing well, being passionate about love or sex, or eating beautifully and deliciously were branded bourgeois excess. The Soviet citizen had to show restraint, food included. Censors even toned down mouth-watering descriptions in bourgeois books. Dickens's feasts grew austere, and in the Soviet Wizard of Oz, white bread became black. With private ownership banned and all bakeries, cafes and restaurants run by the state, generations grew up without access to elegant table settings and pleasurable dining. The Soviet canteen was a negation of hedonism. Dishes killed the appetite or stirred outright disgust. Coffee was ladled from a giant cloudy pot. Its hue resembled dishwater from rinsing a cup. Cockroaches scuttled among the cabbage. The cutlets were grey and forlorn. The communist nostalgia restaurants that have sprung up since it ended do not recreate this misery. Of course not, because no one would eat there if they did. One almost wishes that they would, though, as a warning to today's youth who flirt a bit too eagerly with communist ideas. At home, Ukrainians preserved their dishes, and once food became available, indulged as much as they could. That's why they fiercely defend the dishes that Soviet cuisine tried to distort and appropriate. So don't be surprised that after years of violence and enforced asceticism, we crave hedonism even in hard times. We want to dress sharply, open third-wave coffee shops, eat well and love freely. And please understand, if in Ukraine you're pressed to finish your plate and forbidden to waste food, they have their reasons.
Yeah, thank you. That's a sad part, but also when I'm thinking about Ukraine and Ukrainian food and how we can reimagine Ukraine or reimagine Ukrainian culture in general and present Ukraine abroad, that's. Do you think that we are starting from a blank page? Did you have any imagination about Ukraine? You graduated. Like, you studied in Oxford, right? So you are a well-educated person, and you came, so you have some background in history. So before coming to Ukraine, did you have any imagination about Ukraine? Did you have any stereotypes about Ukraine?
None that could be easily distinguished from stereotypes that I had about other Eastern European countries and Russia, I think, if I'm perfectly honest. I mean, as I said, I was absolutely aware that Ukraine and Russia were two different countries, but I wouldn't have known what I could pinpoint as being a major difference. But I think that a lot of Ukrainians as well are discovering things about their history and becoming more interested because of the war with Russia. It's not only foreigners but also Ukrainians who are sort of much more interested in defining these things. But everything about national identity, I think, is so hard to define and pin down. When doing this book, we kept a bit like the watermelon stories, one example of it. There were other things that didn't make it into the book because you would say, Ukrainians this, Ukrainians that, and I would just say, but everyone, this applies to everybody. You know, it's quite hard to find the things that don't apply to everybody, but they're definitely, it's absolutely something that exists in a feeling of what an identity is, but it's also often something that's hard to pin down and explain in categoric terms, don't you think?
Basically, this is our task, to put Ukraine on the mind map of a reader, right? We don't need to. The only stereotype that we need to debunk about Ukraine is that it's not Russia. That's probably the only thing. So we need to create Ukraine in the minds, right? So because we have to start from a blank page.
Yes, but I think that lots of people have no idea about most countries, and so lots of people are starting from a blank page when they learn about any new country. Ukraine, you know, the people who've now learned something about Ukraine because Ukraine's in the news all the time, they probably hardly know anything about Serbia. And if they had just been, I'm talking about younger people, if they had just been 18 to 25 years old in the early 1990s, they would have known a lot more about Serbia or the former Yugoslavia, Croatia and all that. Unfortunately, no one can hold that much knowledge about that many countries in their minds at a time, perhaps.
Yeah, basically, I can remember you moved to, you started visiting Ukraine more or less in 2010, right? Or 20?
Yeah, I came first in 2007, and then the next time was 2010. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the time when I started visiting other countries, when I moved outside Ukraine. So I had my own stereotypes about Western culture and about other countries. And probably one of the stereotypes that I had, that Ukraine in some ways was really unique, and sometimes in a negative way unique. I mean that only our families are so annoying, for instance, or only our relatives are annoying us with all this advice, or that only Ukrainians like gardening, this hardcore gardening, right?
Well, yeah,
like
but you
borshch.
convinced me of that one.
Yeah, and I wrote a chapter about that. But still, I had the opposite experience, that I suddenly realized that in Spain or Germany, family issues are more or less the same. Some cultural issues are the same. They have their quarrels with grandparents. They have their quarrels with parents. They have some quarrels over the food and so on. So my realization back then was that Ukraine is not that unique.
I want to explain about the garden thing. There's a chapter called Horod, the Ukrainian vegetable garden. And when I first read what you'd written, I said, but in England, people have vegetable gardeners as well. They do this. And then you said, yeah, but not in the kind of hardcore way that Ukrainians do it. And for historical reasons, which we've explained, I think. And you convinced me that, yeah, it is definitely much more of an intense kind of gardening that people do in Ukraine than in Britain, where it's a kind of a hobby for people who are retired.
Not like David Beckham gardening, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have 2 chapters left that we would like to read to you, which is compliments and fine wines, right?
Yeah, we've got time.
Yeah, we still have time,
yeah.
and we also have some time for questions if you have some. So think about the questions. If you want to have any questions, that's okay too. But we are ready to answer them. But before that, I would like to summarize our conversation with a question: how to represent Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian food, and Ukraine in general in bad ways abroad.
In bad ways?
In bad ways, yeah. And what did you have any experience with that? Because I did.
If you're talking about abroad, I'm not sure, but I think that there was, until quite not that long ago anyway, a tendency for restaurants that would be serving Ukrainian food in Ukraine to have all kinds of folksy kind of decor, like a village house.
And Cossacks.
Or Cossacks, yeah. Basically to call on the kinds of cliches that were actually what was allowed under the Soviet Union in terms of the identities. The Soviet Union, liked to say that it was in favor of celebrating the identities of the various different composing countries, but in fact it would just be folk dances, folk costumes, and certain sort of caricatural aspects. And I think it's very good that Ukraine's now gone beyond that, and if you go to a trendy Ukrainian restaurant in Kiev, it's not going to be trying to pretend that you're at some village chata.
And abroad, the progress is not as quick as in Kiev.
So what's this?
Yeah, because abroad, at times you would find people trying to represent Ukraine. For instance, if a Ukrainian community comes together and thinks, how are we going to represent Ukraine? How are we going to celebrate Independence Day? The first idea would, let's make borshch. Let's make borshch in large quantities.
Is that such a bad idea?
No, it's not the bad idea, but often it's the only idea. That's the problem.
Well, they should make varenyky. It's more effort, though. But you say, according the effort is supposed to be part of the of the thing of the.
Yeah, but folk dances, varenyky and borshch is not the only things that Ukraine has to show, and I'm very happy that now the things are changing.
Yeah, but if you're going to make some food in large quantities to serve at some kind of festival, what are the options then for if it's going to be Ukrainian?
Oh my God, you're like your dad. Your dad asked me exactly the same question.
Really?
The other year, yeah.
Deruny, very good answer. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Налисники, деруни, right. See, we have other options.
Yeah, it's true. Holubtsi, yeah. Holubtsi, it's true. That would be a good idea. Golubci, yeah.
Like the Hutsul holubci, and by the way, you mentioned them in the book because you here in Kiev you would find holubci like a standard size, but in Carpathians they have this holubci like a finger size. So this is a very nice option to take with a toothpick, right? So
yeah, we served those kinds of holubci in this restaurant in Kharkiv, Tripichi, which is a very good new Ukrainian restaurant in Kharkiv. I had them the other day, and I ordered the holubci, and they were like little like that. And at first I thought, oh, and then they were really delicious.
We have a chapter on that, which is called "Roll, Baby, Roll," because Ukrainians love rolling things up. Yeah. But we have time for 2 more chapters, and then we'll round up. So I will read compliments, and you'll find fine wines.
Okay.
Okay. Just a second. Compliments. Ukrainians struggle with compliments. Delicious food, one might naturally say to a Ukrainian who has cooked a meal. No way, the Ukrainian would exclaim. It did not turn out as it should have. It's too salty, sour, raw, overcooked, burned, hard, soft. No, you then respond, it's just right. The dialogue will not end here, unfortunately. The Ukrainian will keep trying to persuade you that the meal you have just eaten was complete rubbish. Your role here is to play along and persuade them of the opposite. It's a tricky game to play, though. The best strategy is to never allow any concessions whatsoever. No steps back. Let's analyze some examples. Ukrainian. No way, it was too salty. I'm sorry. Very rude, you're done. Ukrainian. No way, it was burned. If you'd answer. I didn't notice. Of course you didn't, because it was not burned. Ukrainian. No way, it was too soft. The texture was interesting. Interesting? Fail. Far better to apply an affirmative strategy. It's not very sophisticated, but reliable. Ukrainian. No way, it was overcooked. Delicious. And too soft. Amazing. Too sour. Best food I've ever tried. Too salty. I would eat it for the rest of my life. I am a failure. Best cook in the universe. In a softer voice. Oh, come on. See? You won.
I think I want to read the one about Chicken Kiev. But I wanted to say something else about the book, and also I think you should say something about the illustrations. But I wanted to say that I think both with your original Zhurba and with what we've tried to do with this, we've tried to have, the kind of self-deprecating humor that is something that I think that Ukrainians have in common with British people, and that not necessarily in common with all other countries, but that there's some affinity that I feel as a British person with Ukraine. And I was wondering about whether or not, now that Volodymyr Zelensky, who's a comedian, is president, Ukraine is associated in the international imagination with humor. And I hope that it is, because I think that the media tend to, if they want to show Zelensky being funny, they will find the best bits, and they will show something that he said that really was funny. But if they go a bit deeper and show, the kind of humor that was actually the mainstay of his shows, then it's perhaps not what you might want to be presented as the best representation of Ukrainian humor. And I think that your writing has a more subtle kind of Ukrainian humor, which I hope will be appreciated by international audiences more and more, both in this and your other books, of course, I'm talking about.
Are you absolutely sure you want to read Chicken Kiev, or maybe Fine Wines?
Why you? I prefer the Chicken. You want me to read the child?
Yeah, it would be
Fine Wines. Okay.
Yeah, it's 62. It's 62.
Okay, you prefer that one. Okay. To Americans, asking how are you or how is it going is basically just another way of saying hello. It is technically a question that you have the right to answer, much as King Charles is technically a monarch with the right to dissolve Parliament. No one actually expects you to do it. But cross the Atlantic, and already this habit of small talk becomes risky. Even Western Europeans will sometimes answer by reporting on how it is actually going. Eastern Europeans, of which Ukrainians are arguably the epitome, almost definitely will. And even at the best of times, they are not inclined to say it is going well. How are you? Chirps the foreigner cheerfully. Sorry, how are you? How, I should do that in an American accent. How are you? Chirps the foreigner cheerfully, rushing to a meeting. Same old, the Ukrainian replies. Just found a kidney stone, need an ultrasound. Boss is a moron, no raise for a year. And have you seen the prices? Yesterday a bun was 12 hryvnias, today it's 20. Kids won't do their homework, so I hired a tutor, $20 an hour. Insanity. My knees ache too. Not sure how I'll make it to my aunt's funeral. Bless her soul. This default setting of whining is in fact a function of politeness. Given the prevailing circumstances for most of Ukraine's recent history, it is logical to suppose that any Ukrainian you meet is likely to have something to complain about. It is therefore polite to assure whoever you are talking to that we are all sufferers in the struggle. This applies even, perhaps even more so, to those Ukrainians who are manifestly doing well. Picture a group of well-to-do Ukrainians dining at a fancy restaurant. The one who shows up in a Porsche will be sure to mention some technical issue with it. The one ordering the expensive gluten-free bread will make a point of describing the terrible stomach pains inflicted on them by the glutens. Whoever chooses the wine will shake their head as they look at the menu to show their exasperation with the poor selection on offer. Even when we want to brag, we do so by complaining.
Thank you. I think we are ready to answer your questions if you have some. Are there any questions? Oh, cool. There is a question.
Добрий вечір. So, what is, Gulliver, what is your first experience with salo and kров'янка? Do you remember that?
We didn't do a chapter on Salo, which sort of leaves the opportunity open for doing a volume 2, I suppose, because it's a slightly odd thing that we didn't. Is there kров'янка mentioned in the book?
No, kров'янка and Salo, no. And I have a screenshot when we are discussing the book is finished, and Gulliver sent me a message. No chapter on Salo and many questions marks. Yeah, probably it was my half. I think it was my intention to avoid Salo in the book for some reason. Just because, we are so famous especially for Salo, and Russians have been making fun of us because of Salo. So I just somehow wanted to avoid Salo, and also there is no chapter on Horilka.
I used to like having Salo in Kupidon, which used to be kind of the one cool bar that there was in Kiev in the years when I first used to come here, or the one cool bar that I knew of. And I often used to eat Salo there. I really liked it, and I haven't had it for ages, actually. Kров'янка. The thing about kров'янка is that I've got this Scottish neighbour who makes his version of kров'янка, which he fries, and it gets crispy. And that is I don't know, I think that maybe the Ukrainian trendy modern, restaurants who are trying to do modern update versions of Ukrainian cuisine should perhaps contact him for the recipe for that, because it's my favorite kров'янка is actually the one made by someone who's not Ukrainian. I don't mean to say by this, I feel like I haven't given enough praise for Ukrainian food here. If any, please don't be thinking that I don't like Ukrainian food. I really do. I love borshch and I love varenyky, even though I like pierogi a bit more. And
But also you said that borshch wasn't a life-changing experience for you. That was...
I said that?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
You did. Anyway, yeah, that was very kind of you to remind that I should say something about illustrations, because this is a very important part of the book. Actually, I should have started from this. So this is not just the collection of texts. It is illustrated by 29 Ukrainian artists. We have at least one of them over there who illustrated asparagus. That's Anya. Maybe someone else has shown up, but I can't see. But anyway, it's a collection of illustrations, and we also give the links to their Instagrams or Behance or other resources where you could see their other works that they've done. So this is like an art catalog as well.
Yes. Has anyone got any?
Okay. So, is there any other questions?
Can I have a second one?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
How about this phenomena of hot dogs from petrol stations?
That is. Thank you for your assistance in preparing volume 2. I mean, all the delicious hot dogs I've ever eaten in my life have been in Ukraine because of this petrol station hot dog phenomenon. They're really excellent, right? Oko. But, that's not to say that they're not that good in Vogue and Klo. And I choose the petrol stations based on my belief. I don't go to the ones that don't have a proper cafe, but I mainly choose them based on my belief about who owns them and who's the least worst oligarch benefiting from them. But I'm not sure that I'm getting it right.
And what do you think about those hot dogs, calling them French? Because Gulliver works for France 24 and we're pretty much connected to France. What do you think about the name, that those hot dogs are called French hot dogs?
Are they?
Do French people know that?
I didn't even know that. Where does it say French?
There was...
because it's in the baguette. Well, was this invented in Ukraine? It's a really great idea, isn't it? To just make a hole in the baguette and stick it in, because that was always the problem with hot dogs before they invented this compact way of eating them, was that the sauce would go absolutely everywhere if you had it sliced down the top. I never liked hot dogs before, and putting them in like that is a brilliant invention, definitely.
And you get a smiley face on top of the sausage. That's also very nice and oko. Okay, any other questions? I think we can take two more if you'd like to. Yeah, there is a question. And by the way, I have to say that Gulliver speaks Ukrainian very well. You are welcome to ask questions in Ukrainian. I will translate them then.
Well, I wanted to ask about food from different regions of Ukraine. How it's is in this book, for example, about Carpathian food?
At least we mention Carpathian holubtsi, but we try not to make things too complicated. If we imagine that this is an introduction to Ukrainian cuisine to a foreigner, so let's not make things overcomplicated.
Yeah, there's the stuff that's about Kherson and the south and the climate.
Right.
But we haven't made it too region-specific. Maybe that's also something that we should consider for a future.
I recall that you also wanted to mention that restaurant on Kharkiv highway, which is 363, right?
363, yeah.
And actually we end up not mentioning it.
Well, because we can't mention one specific establishment without mentioning a few others, right? It would be... There's another highway restaurant that, if you're ever going west in Sarny, Pani Żurawlina is absolutely fantastic as well. Though 363 has the advantage that you just can order whatever is the cheapest thing on the menu, and they will provide you with bread and sallow. Just everything comes with bread and sallow, so it's just fantastic.
But we mentioned one specific company here, which is Ukrzaliznytsia.
Yeah. Well, Ukrzaliznytsia is a special company, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a special company, and Gulliver is a huge fan of Ukrzaliznytsia. He got as a present, he got that book that you can see on the shelf, which is about Ukrainian railway. And also we have an ambition, it's not yet done, but we have an ambition to sell our book at Ukrzaliznytsia shop. And that's why we also mention Ukrzaliznytsia and train food.
Not the food that's sold on the trains, really, but the way that people bring their own food and eat it. Though the food that's sold on the intercity trains, maybe this is also, there's been an improvement, I think, in the food that's sold on the intercity trains lately that you can get in the cafe there.
Yeah. Okay, last question. Natalia. Oh, yeah, there is another one.
Українською?
Да, можна.
Якщо би ви відкривали український ресторан в Британії, в Лондоні, що би ви подавали там, щоб цей бізнес був успішний? Тобто смаки, які були би цікаві там.
If you would open Ukrainian restaurant in London, what would you serve there? which flavors would be interesting for British people.
Так. Маю відповісти українською. Те, що прийде до голови, це я би поїхав до Харкова, до ресторану «Три печі» і просто скопіював меню.
Okay.
Ну, голубці точно. І різні, я думаю, що можна було б робити різні типи голубці з різними соусами трішки, тому що там є варіанти. І так само з варениками, так, можна робити різні вареники і теж на десерт, але треба йти далі і не тільки робити те, що кліше. Качку з яблуками, язик, такий...
Я дуже не впевнена, що за різні соуси на голубцях тебе би не захейтила Ukrainian community in London.
Так? А в Харкові не захейтили?
Ukrainians are quite conservative in that sense. We had another question over there.
Yeah, thank you for the evening. I wanted to ask if there is anything in Ukrainian cuisine that people are crazy about, but you don't like personally. Like, I just come to consciously choosing holodets as a dish to eat, but maybe you have something like
Did
that.
you know we've got a chapter on holodets? And Yevhenia wanted to ask me about what I think of holodets. And I had to admit to her that I've never tried it. Or if I've tried it, I don't remember. Marichka is now looking at me and saying, I'm going to be in trouble. I don't remember. Because I'm as...
Maybe you were not told that was holodets. Anyway, you find it so disgusting that you didn't even dare to try it.
I'm going to have to remedy this, of course.
May I please read another section on holodets? Yeah?
No.
Am I allowed? Yeah?
Okay.
I think we have time for that, right? And I think maybe we will round up with this chapter. Holodets. A wobbly, trembling, meaty jelly. Sound appetizing? Perhaps you'd be more tempted if we told you that it's served cold. As its name, holodets from holod implies. It has to be cold to retain its texture because it is a congealed, right, broth with bits of meat in it. The very concept tills both the soul and the stomach. It's possible Ukraine would have attracted more tourists over the years were it not for the fear of being served this. But honestly, is it the most disgusting thing on earth? Global cuisine has far more horrifying substances to offer, and we had a discussion on that. What we can list: veal tails, bull testicles, fried snakes. I honestly, fish and chips, right, William?
We deleted that. You
Because you insisted on deleting that. Well, basically, I put it British cuisine in general, but Gulliver was terrified and deleted it immediately. Monkey brains, fermented duck eggs, the currywurst that you added instead of British cuisine. That's right.
Oh, I did order brain in a cafe in Kiev, brain toast, which I thought was going to be toast with something, lots of vitamins that are good for the brain, and it was actually brains. That was the thing. I don't know if it's in any way traditional, but that was one thing that I wasn't able to eat in Ukraine that was served to me in the cafe.
I think that would be enough. Let's yeah,
Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine. Holodets is both ageist and macho. For a proper, tender holodets, you need a rooster. It can't be a hen. You need an alpha male, but young, one not yet weathered by life. A rooster that hasn't had a midlife crisis, considered buying a motorcycle or shared hysterical anti-vaccine posts. You need a fresh, carefree specimen. Only a broth made from such a rooster will contain enough collagen to sate into holodets, right? Holodets demands humility. No chef can guarantee that any particular rooster has enough collagen. Did he get enough exercise? Was his diet balanced? Did he spend too much time on Twitter? It all depends on the personal luck of the individual rooster, which means you must be prepared for the possibility that your broth will remain just that, a broth. In the end, it's alchemy. Slicing broth with a knife isn't that magic. Holodets teaches patience. Of course, one may cheat and add gelatin, but we are talking about authentic holodets and ambitious cuisine. So, if the rooster lived a well-trained, happy, free-range but short life, producing enough collagen to transform into holodets, then you too can partake in the mystical broth that can be eaten with a knife and fork. Often, a sprig of parsley and a delicately carved star of carrot is added, frozen gracefully in the transparent jelly. Have you ever seen a leaf trapped and immortalized in amber? Beautiful, isn't it? Just like holodets. Paradoxically, holodets is considered a winter dish, though it's refreshingly pleasant on hot days. In the past, when there were no refrigerators, it simply wouldn't set in a warm weather. Now you can defy the seasons and enjoy holodets any time of the year. And if you truly love someone, tell them, I melt beside you like holodets next to a steaming potato. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, for listening to us. It was a very pleasant evening, I hope so.
Yes, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Yevhenia, for involving me in this project.
Thanks. If you want to sign any books, we are ready to sign them. If you have a pen, do you?